start. And you know what? I'm also reading this as sort of a vindication for myself because I went to one of the early readings I went to in my hometown of Worcester. They had a backing band, so they said,
You're being recorded, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
it's okay. So they said, you can ask the band to play behind you, give them a mood and they'll just kind of riff. And I did that, and I'm on the stage, and the band is ripping behind me, and I can't hear myself, so I assume the audience couldn't hear me, so I was yelling. So that was not a good reading. So I'll try not to do that this time. The poem's title is from the song One by U2 as a lyric. It's called Love is a Temple, Love the Higher Law. Like an unwashed tongue, the road rolls toward me and away. At 70 mph, I'm giving a concert at top volume. A magnitude of blood crawls in my temples and leadens my head, bowed low with new weight, though my back has been hunched in a sob 7 years, and my bowels shake because I have taken the dense blue pill, which will eat the virus if it managed to breach my skin. Last time I pulled a man down in my lap to feel my love inside out, like the Bee Gees sang. In sex ed, I paid attention on disease day. They said it is smaller than any bacterium. Now, every time I swallow my own saliva, I wonder, is my swallow normal or inflamed? If no infection but glands swollen, it could be the flu that warns new converts with HIV 6 weeks after it starts making as many molecular copies as the body has cells. There is no way the human mind can visualize 1 trillion. This dark lullaby also vibrated in my ears the day at 15 I left the house, the yard, the family, like a stray electron broke free from its compound. I was young, but I knew how a man demolishes his wife or children or self-destructs, pointing at his head before he raises the wrecking ball or hammer or shotgun slug. Oh, love, oh, God, oh, man, I'm going to come a distance greater than any ache, carrying in this body one infection to give you with my love. I know you can taste how I decided that day to go on living as long as I could, and yet the male ejaculate on skin is the cleanest smell there is. It is the closest thing a man alone can make to a newborn child. This is called Self-Talk in End Times. What's your inner voice like? Is it angry with commands? Quit talking about this wound as if it never closed. Stop talking about war as if it never was. Do you kiss your favorite pet or your mother with that mouth? Oh, forget it. You can't. You're an orphan since age 3. Is that the story you want to stick to? What do you feel every time you sit behind the wheel? What's the word for a brain stuck? Like a Jeep's turn signal, you're behind in fucking traffic, blinking, blinking, and you itch to turn left. The parking lot is where you sat when he left, and you can't say his name, not in this poem. But it showed up on street signs, billboards, commercials, awnings above every general store for years. How many? You don't count anymore. And what about the so-called world beyond the self? Remember your bald boss used to say, the problem with your generation is you never had a war or a recession. Like magic, you suffered both, worse than his age ever had it. What a coincidence that war is the best cure for depressions, economic. You've been waterboarded, but you can't confess. Your tongue's been cut out. You can't name catastrophe, ashy skies and iceberg oceans caused by the orgy of war. Some territories too big to explore today. You've only got 2 legs and worn out footwear. So stay here, navel gazing, eating like it's a holiday, buying like it's going out of style, whining Feed me, love me. If you say the end and no one's here to take pics, did it really happen? One of the features of the book is that there's a long poem in it called Love is Finished Again that would be like 11 pages if it was all together, but I broke it up throughout the book and presented in what I call movements. So, and they kind of give the reader a little respite in between subject matter and some of the more intense poems. So I'll read from those a few times. This is called Love is Finished Again. It's a sixth movement. Like one violin that scratches, like one violin that cries a string of notes is always joined by a partner violin, extending the cry, while one violin takes a break to breathe. The wind comes off the strings as off a body of water. Love is finished, love begins, taking over from another love. There's a lot of prose poems in the book, which we get to talk about when we talk about form later. This is one of them called Resurrection Spell. Begin with a spiral mountain road with no end. Its curves a familiar, smooth drive. One morning, my mind is composing a theory of body as more than bone, as a series of rooms configured vertically, all hung together by bakery string. Seeing only a stick, I roll my tires neatly over what becomes a black snake. Fact, black snakes are harmless. What's the mathematics of surface area pressure? What is the weight of this car? Last night on a rainforest walk, an unseen blackbird took flight, abruptly shoved off his thick green cover to flee. My body's response, blood fear, a chemical reminder I'm animal first. My mother's mother sat at the bedside of great-grandma Camilla and knew the hour she'd die. Camilla tried to leave her bed, pleading, needing to touch feet to ground one more time. This woman in a hospital bed did not mean tile, she meant black soil. And I spend hours conjuring my first love, charming him back from the dead with words he left me. I could touch his black hair again while he smiles with bloodshot eyes. When last I saw him, his body was simply slack weight, a deflated membrane his mother would sponge wash. Fact, a snake run over slithers back into the greenery soundlessly, not even curling its tongue. Fact, its vertebrae are cracked, its ribs are crushed, its injury will be lethal, but not right away. I'll still be driving home, radio loud, raising songs that bring my baby alive. A snake in this kind of pain takes a long time with its dying. A friend is interviewing me about the book, and one of the things she made a lot of is the mysticism. So here's another poem that has spells in it, like the last, and another prose poem. The night I asked you to break my heart, because the split we made was good for us both, but this was 2 years later, hope's long coma, which could only end if the stronger of us pulled the cord from the power source. So I packed my messenger bag with methods to rend my most important organ. Steak knife, hammer, shards of broken mirror, straitjacket, guillotine in miniature, and in case we needed something more powerful, a magic book of curses. Most spells are made with words and broken by a kiss. Why not the other way around? I'll spare everybody the bloody fine points of how we got it done, and how I got home, I can't remember. But I lay a long time unable to sleep, counting instead of sheep, ex-loves who no longer take my calls. And in the event that they would take my calls, I divided them like prison bricks into 2 piles. Wouldn't know what to say, and wouldn't know how to say it. As usual, this left me spent, and in sleep I dreamed 7 dreams. I dreamed a helicopter in a hurricane. It lifts, but it'll never get anywhere. I dreamed the waiter saw I was thirsty but would not bring water. I dreamed my brother cut himself open with a scythe in my grandfather's garden. I dreamed I came to your birthday at the Alabama governor's yellow mansion, and no one turned to speak to me except your twin. I dreamed myself heaving up chunks of pink cupcake. I dreamed the world ended your way with a single glowing solar flare instead of my way. And I dreamed my dead wrestled your dead. I say again, my ghosts took up swords against your ghosts. And neither army had won when I twisted awake next morning, but at least the strange man in my mirror wasn't as ugly as I remembered. This poem lies right in the middle of the book. It's one of my favorites. If you read a lot of poetry, you might notice that there's usually a really strong poem right in the middle of the book. This is called Draft Divorce Decree. Every token I have given you shall remain your property except the ring, which, let the record show, you refuse to return. But I have its twin, so that's fine. And you retain ownership rights to the world's furry bunnies and all woodland creatures, which remind me of you anyway. Permission to trade fathers is granted. Our mother's custody will be handled jointly. I must have my ancestors' burial site and the river that borders it. And all the highways in America were mine to begin with. And you shall have all railway rights. You have Lay Lake, Alabama, with the cabin and pontoon boat your parents own, and gray trees thick as an armory turret. But don't think everything south of Mason-Dixon's yours, because Virginia is for lovers, and Knoxville is the scruffy city no one loves as I do. And as for all bicycle paths, we will have to work out a signaling system. Otherwise, we will collide, and that won't do, while I train myself to believe you are dead or never existed, not walking these streets where I might walk, these brick sidewalks I've walked all my life. Therefore, all of New England is mine, but you have lifetime rights to reside here, a sort of ground lease granted to you this day by me. And you can have Montreal in summer if I have the other 3 seasons, because that's fair. Amsterdam shall be yours, but I claim the right to visitation exactly twice. All of the castles of Europe, yours, except romantic France, shall be mine to roam, unless you're on a layover or you pass through by rail. All islands of the world are also yours because I get seasick easily. Remember the drug you slipped me that doubled my vision, and you dimmed the light and kept watch? Next day came the ring, and I said I would put my life in your hands again, which I did when you drove the jet ski at Lay Lake, where I return whenever I dream a perfect place. In fact, when I find myself there, that's precisely how I know that I am dreaming. I think I'm going to do a few more from the book, and then if we still have time, I'll read some newer stuff. This is called A Letter to My Therapist While I Am High. And it borrows some words and phrases from James Baldwin's novel, Giovanni's Room. I'll kill love so dead that it never comes back. I swear I'll do it. Look out. Every good love story has murder inside it. James Baldwin knew that. Does murder equal love? Is the true secret this thing too dark to learn, that by killing a thing, or a person, you become them. Like eating, like we lay to waste molecules, energy, knowledge. And if this is true, what is this hunger? Later, I'll be embarrassed to read this, but I'll still turn and turn this idea, obsessed like a knife shucking oysters, and burn like the holiest God. Don't you dare come any closer, madness, to my mind, for I know what you want, madness. I can smell you like one of my own men I spend time inside, yet remain unknown, like medicine or music or the weight of packs of bricks he takes out of his heart at night, while I throw and catch daggers, oblivious to the hurt. This is too many explosive epiphanies to survive in daylight, and clearly I'll never express what I feel in a brief sigh of yes, and when some man from my neighborhood is next upon my doorstep, I will ask, do you pray? I'll say, stand back. I am dangerous as any change you've faced, for I don't know where my next meal will come from. Two more from the book. Loving all these men, is that what I think I've been doing? Honey, if I'm real, I've been fucking around. And when did I insist on ruining myself, like someone who ruins a shirt in a bike rack? Okay, there are many more ways to ruin. Skinned knees, blood, and dirt are the basics. To ruin is to spoil. Think of fruit spilled in wind. It disintegrates slowly, its rind resembling, for a long time, a shell. This also happens to bodies left on the farm unburied. To ruin is to leave ruins, noseless busts, torn porcelain faces, shards of columns, caves of Pompeii with angels frescoed on walls of what were surely brothel rooms. What I want is to get the root of one person's ruin by their own hand. The way my car's been dented on every side. Once from my bike collapsing against a door. Once when I backed up hard into Carolina bedrock. Once when a snowplow chewed the forward wheel well. That summer, my front bumper snagged on a pole and tore. Metal shrieked as I pulled away after midnight from the man who panted with me, smoke-hot, quiet breaths at the head of his driveway. He didn't want to wake his husband sleeping in the vinyl-sided house. And again, I said I was sort of reading a little more backwards than I usually do. This is actually the oldest poem in the book in terms of when I wrote it. This is I've probably been writing this poem since 2008. So poetry books have a long gestation period. We never spoke of Dodge City again. If we woke some nights tangled in blankets in a white and black room, I knew it meant we'd fallen asleep again before a movie ended. Mornings, I'd roll over and look at the mirror rather than at him. I did not know the hazel eyes would fade faster than someone's scent from a shirt sleeve or pillowcase. There were exactly 5 theories of love at the time, according to my notebook. No tests for those theories. You just had to know. Months later, we drove from one coast to another and not the same city, passenger and driver, or whatever else we were. By the time we reached Kansas, we were its ghost, a wisp of smoke lit by the red glare of taillights, nearly invisible dust hovering over a mound of dirt. What little skin we had dried up in wind in small towns with white water towers, where orphaned branches blew along the ground outside of squat brick houses. Somewhere before Junction City, he paused to show me the millions of stars. I had never looked at them before, never strained my body looking, stretched all my senses, as if to trap galaxies tightly inside me. I knew their light would die before we arrived. The sudden lack of atmosphere astounded me, and heat flew from my limbs, so thin and airy that I barely noticed. There was one bridge in Kansas. We crossed it. And oh man, time.
You're fine.
Okay, so I think I'll read a couple of newer poems. I'm going to start with one from what I'm thinking of as my next manuscript, where the main character is the god of love, and my version of the god of love. One of the quirks about him is when he is given voice, he speaks in the royal we. So he does that here. This poem is called "The God of Love Explains Polyamory," Part 1. We kissed another man. We got drunk and gave an erotic massage. We drove to his dorm in thick, wet snow, the blizzard giving us no choice but to cheat. We boned the assistant rowing coach. We asked a basketball fan with big biceps if we could touch his muscles. We think he has a podcast now. We kissed a man whose face smelled like burgers. We have smelled and tasted worse. In a doorway, we kissed a man the first time he said, "I love you." That man made us a 33-year-old widow. Have we ever told you that we kissed another man at a party while he was at work? 1 week later, kissed again by the bar's pink mirror while his friends watched. We debated the ethics of that. We slept with 2 lawyers on the same day. We kissed a man holding an umbrella waiting for a train. We kissed that same man's twin. Beside the ocean at low tide, we kissed another man with poisonous intentions to kill. If you've ever tried to let go of a man, you know it is the hardest thing. And more than once, beyond limits of mind, we kissed another man and saw the dark fabric of space and time. We invented fucking to stab through the thin veil curtain. We existed everywhere and in this very bed. By now you get the idea. We held on to none of them, not one. What else can we say, babe? We came home and ran up the stairs to tell you this. My last poem that I'll read is something I worked on. It's actually my first sonnet. I'm bad at writing sonnets because I'm finding that I have a narrative impulse. I want to tell a story, and sonnet's not good for that. But recently, Diane Seuss, who is a mentor, put out a series of prompts. She's a chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, and she put out a series of prompts this summer. And the first one was to kind of imitate a sonnet by Eduardo C. Corral that uses the word loneliness in every line. So you kind of supposed to name an emotional state and repeat it in every line. I had trouble naming my emotional state. So I did something a little different and then titled the poem "Current Emotional State," with thanks to Eduardo C. Corral and Diane Seuss. Enlightenment used to do laughter yoga, but it really thrived in improv classes. Enlightenment can be yours for 8 easy payments. A loaf of bread comes free with enlightenment. Spelt wheat, white and black sesame seeds. Eat, for enlightenment may be personified but not embodied. Enlightenment may cause bone marrow ache. Take 2 enlightenment before bed. Don't swim for half an hour. Enlightenment of the whole shelf of rare earth metals is rarest and densest. Enlightenment's melting point is many miles from Earth. Picture enlightenment as a space station in slow orbit. Enlightenment never wonders if it lived other lives before this. Enlightenment knows itself unbroken from Big Bang to atom bomb. Enlightenment may be subject to civil and/or criminal penalties. Enlightenment grows plentiful as pollen. A sidewalk weed, you do not notice it. That's what I have. Thank you.
So as per our tradition here, we're gonna ask you to stay up there
Sure.
and talk with you for a while. So I'll start with audience questions or comments or responses. What have you got? What are you thinking, folks? I feel like a teacher now. This is terrible. This is my summer vacation.
I like the divorce. This is the way it started out. I had the same situation where I asked for the room back, I didn't come back. So.
Thank you.
Emotional way of trying to disconnect everything from the lives.
I have a question about that. I'm glad you brought that up. The divorce decree poem. It's a kind of programmatic poem. Like sometimes you start a poem with a scheme in your head. Sometimes you don't. That seems like a schematic poem. Was that deliberate? Did you know you were gonna? I'm gonna make this
in the form.
It's a form of a divorce decree, right? That's what I'm doing.
Yes, well, oftentimes something like that will trigger a thing for me. So yeah, I remember, I remember looking up what's the right word? Oh, it's called the decree. And that was like, I get interested in that. And then, so sometimes I write with a form in mind. Sometimes I free write, which is why the prose poem, comes in handy because the free writes I just try to fill the page with words. And so sometimes that never gets into a poetic form, it just stays a block of text. And other times I have a form and then I have something I've been meaning to write about and kind of bring them together.
I couldn't help but notice the things that were divided in the divorce were places.
So I've traveled a lot. I've been to all the lower 48 states. And I've done like 6 cross-country trips. And there was a time when I thought I was going to write a poem for every state, but that got a little boring for me. And like, sometimes you're
In what state did it get boring? Like,
I have something for every state, but I don't have good poems for every state, right? So, but the idea, my travels sort of ended up in the book, and that's one of the places where it's apparent,
Right.
thinking globally and thinking about the places and the associations you have with different places.
other questions, or I have like 8 million questions, so I would rather defer. Wow, so
I'm not shy, so.
so many. So let's start with your bio, right? What's good about, you said you're labeling yourself a sex poet.
Yeah.
What's good about, now I've heard, as most poets have, most people have who write poetry, you hear many sex poems when you go to readings. What's good about the sex poem for you? Like what do we get out of the sex poem? Writing it, hearing it?
Well, I believe in writing from the body, so a bodily experience, that's part of it.
What do you mean by that, writing from the body?
Well, so I'm very influenced by the Art of Memoir by Mary Carr. And she's like a whole chapter where she talks about how you write from the body when you're trying to write a memory that's difficult or a trauma. And she's like, don't write, I was afraid, write, I could feel a cold bead of sweat run down my back. That's that physical thing, that bodily thing that our bodies do when we're in tension or trauma or fear or any of that stuff, or love or sex, makes it universal, makes it connect with the reader. And that just always stuck with me. So I try to make my poems alive in that way. So sex is one of the ways to do it. But I also like put that into the bio as a way of saying, like, don't dismiss this book because there's a lot of sex in it, because I know there's a lot of sex in it, it's there on purpose, but there's more than just that. So I didn't want anybody to be able to say, this is just a book about sex. So if you like that, you might like it. If you don't, you won't. I wanted to kind of claim the label in advance.
Related, this might be a stupid question to ask a gay man in America, but why is writing about your sexual identity important to you? And maybe for anybody, why is it important?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot has been made of how the personal is political. So writing that as a political act. But it's also just, and another way of looking at it is just writing about my life and what my life is made of, and it's inseparable from that. I had a long-term partnership, and he died, and if I'm going to write about that, you're going to know that I'm a gay man, and so there's no like I need to lean into that, not lean away from it. So I think of it as just like sort of telling my stories. But I also had, when I was in my NFA program, I had somebody say like, it's fine, like it's fine if you're gay, but you have to write about it every time.
Well,
all the time.
that's the sort of stereotypical
Right.
reaction to people writing about being gay, right? So
I'm like, these are stories that weren't told for thousands of years. So you might have to work a little harder to come up with something fresh. If you're a straight white woman who was asking me the question, but like, I'm just writing my experience, and it has a value.
Oh, again, I have lots of questions. I'll just keep going. And maybe somebody will jump in and stop me. So a couple of sort of technical things. Language, as it is to all poets, but specifically turns of phrase and specific words like ruin, for example, seem really important to you. How important is it to you when you're writing a poem, working on a poem? How much are you sort of paying extra attention to the way people talk and the words they use while you're working? Do you think about that? Or is it just sort of like, are you heightened at that moment when you've got a poem in a hopper kind of trying to tease it out?
I guess it's similar to what I said earlier when I talked about writing from the body as a way of keeping life in the poems. I don't consider a poem really finished unless you can feel that there's a person speaking that. So I do try to get like authentic voice into it, whether it's my voice or I'm imitating something or repeating something I've overheard or that you might overhear. I want it to feel alive, and then I found that it was sort of it's also this way of getting like a high culture, low culture intention in the poems, like everyday vernacular language meets up against the things in that particular poem about ruins are things that are in museums or you go spend a lot of money to see, and so that's high art, and then whereas talking about a hookup, or some of the other language or phrases in there that come across the way you would talk to your buddy, or there's also like a lot of books in the book about self-talk and how we talk to ourselves. So I guess I'm interested in that, and I try to get a lot of different modes in there, in the sense that, or to speak to the fact that how we talk to each other can have poetry in it, or the everyday language can have poetry in it.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to my son the other day who just went to college, and was a while back. He said, "I can't go to this college because I will ruin myself." And I thought, what exactly do you mean by that? And then he's actually at that college now, so hopefully he's not doing that. But this is related to the sort of concrete details, the imagery, the specific imagery, the things of ordinary life, or everyday life. Your poems really seem to grow out of those. Like the poems that aren't schematic seem to just dwell in those details for a while until the voice kind of figures out where it's going. And that's really interesting to me. And like, it's a really hard thing to do for a poet, kind of dwell in those details. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, how do you get into that frame of mind? Or
so that sort of reminds me of I heard, so I don't know the exact quote, that Sharon Olds, for example, who's a Pulitzer-winning poet, said, I don't really have a great imagination. I'm very descriptive, like she can render detail. And I think that might be my issue too, in the sense like not a lot is made up, but a little detail, a little object can take on a lot of meaning. It can become a symbol the way that you use it in the poem. or the way that you turn it over. And so, yeah, I guess I do find myself doing that. And I guess maybe related to that, I think the book is a lot about trying, like trying and failing, or trying and trying again anyway. And you see that sometimes in my attempts to follow a form, and then I abandon it, or interested in forms that kind of I didn't read this one poem that's a longer poem. I haven't read it before, and it takes over 5 minutes. I didn't want to read it, but it's based on a Marie Howe poem about the seven devils that were supposed to have possessed Mary Magdalene. And she's like, the first devil was, blah, blah, blah. And she goes down the list, but she doesn't get all the way to number 7. She kind of comes back and says, like, no, scratch that. The first devil is something else. So I kind of did my own take on that. And it's like an interest in the imperfection, the trying to get to perfection, the way we beat ourselves up when we don't get there. So you see it even in the language and in the forms I choose.
And you make reference just in your talking to us, you've referred to a lot of different poets. You have a poem in the book, and I should talk about the book a little bit. That's a cento, right? Which is a poem made up of lines by other poets.
Yeah.
What appealed to you about writing that kind of poem? Because that's like, there are a lot of people who hate doing that. There are a lot of people who just love it and sort of live for it. So
yeah, so this is a poem that mashes up the Song of Songs from the Bible, which is like one of the oldest and most beautiful love poems we have in language, with relatively recent, since 2000, pop song lyrics. So I was just, it was an experiment. Again, it was a trying something. And so just like, has the language of love changed over the 3,000 years, or is it not? And
what's the verdict?
it changes. I think it changes. I think the I who wrote of this book believes that it changes, and maybe even that the language is in danger. But I think at the same time, I also have poems later in the book and I put them later in the book on purpose, where I co-wrote them with my iPhone. So I let how iPhone will suggest what word you thinks is going to come next. So I kind of did that in 3 or 4 poems, and I put them late in the book because I wanted this to be an image of sort of language decaying, like what is happening to our language, where the iPhone puts us in this box. There's only so many words, but when people read the book, the feedback I've gotten is like, wow, you proved that like our text shortcuts and our predictive text can still fit into the world of poetry. It's like, maybe I did. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think we have a choice, judging from like the classes I teach.
Right.
We're sort of going to like, okay, get out your iPhone, get out your AI, and like that's step 1 in writing your poem.
Yeah.
And then we'll work with what this thing spit out.
Exactly.
Because there's so many who just go right to it. And so,
yeah.
Yeah.
You have Instagram poetry, and yeah. I find that I'm in my next manuscript, I'm still interested in the same thing, which is difficult again, because I said I have this impulse to tell stories, but then if you're going to write some poems that are just sort of language experiments, how do you make them come together?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that interests me. So
you wanted to talk about the prose poem. You mentioned it, so I'll just go ahead.
I think you can't read my book and not recognize that the book is interested in form. There's a lot of variety of forms in it, but then it comes back to the prose poems. There's probably about a dozen in the book, and I found that it was. I started writing those prose poems after I was done with my MFA thesis in grad school. So I was kind of like, oh, I wrote a book while I was here. I did it in 3 semesters instead of 4, so I'm done. And then my last semester, I took a short forms class with Amy Hempel, who's primarily a short story writer. And although if you read like an Amy Hempel story, you might find it indistinguishable from a prose poem because they're beautiful, and she's labored over every word and every cadence. But when I took her class, it was sort of just for fun. And so I was writing these prose poems every week and thinking I was already done writing a book. So I was free. So what came out was better than what was in the book I had written, which is on the shelf in my at Stony Brook, but it's not what ended up in this book.
Right.
And the prose poem is also one of the things I like about it is that it's kind of a durable form. Like you've seen My Mind Goes Everywhere, or it turns this thing over as long as it wants and then it abandons it and goes someplace else. So the prose poem, because of the predictability of that and how stable that looks on the page, is just a box of text. I can go every which way in subject matter and in my mind and in associations, and it will hold it. So I think that's why I'm drawn to it.
The complexity of your thought is something I've got in my notes here. Almost every poem in this collection has this really complex train of thought, and a lot of it follows images. But like, can you talk about that? When is that just the way you think? Like, if I'm having a conversation with you, there's just like this complexity coming out, or is it something you think about sort of consciously while you write a poem? Like, how complex can I be, or do I want to let myself go here and just associate?
It's funny because I'm very linear in everyday life. So I work at a museum. Everybody at the museum is creative. When we have like staff meetings, everybody wants to say ideas, and I'm just sitting there like, how are we going to do that? How much is it going to cost? What are we going to do? You know, what do we need to get done by Wednesday if we're going to get that done by Friday? And I'm the one linear thinker in the group. So so it's kind of funny that in poetry it's something else, right? I think and poems are these made objects, so I have to pay attention to, even though my thoughts may trail off or stray thoughts may want to come in, that at the end of the day, there's like an artistic whole there. So I do have to like revise very heavily and make sure that the reader can follow my leaps. I was thinking about this on the drive today too, because I think, like I know a poet who's saying, "Oh, I've done the narrative poetry thing, and I want to move associatively." And I was thinking that was the one thing I was good at when I used to turn in these free writes, and people would say, the workshop leader would be like, I don't know what this is, but these are some beautiful leaps, and it's the subconscious doing it. So I learned how to keep the subconscious in the poem, even though I've heavily revised it.
Trusting your subconscious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And trusting the reader to come along, but the reader can't come along for absolutely everything. You have to kind of make decisions about, can I do this without boring them, or can I do that? Will this still make sense? You know.
So I was going to ask you about structure, but I think I'd rather ask you, is there anything you'd like to say about this book to someone who's coming to it, picking it up?
I I really paid attention to what it would be like as an experience. Like I don't want my poem to be, or I don't want a poem or my book to be about something. I want it to make you feel something or take you on a journey. And I kind of realized that when I was writing my marketing copy, and I'm happy with my marketing copy because so many poetry book descriptions are like, this poet is really writing about humanity and life and death. And, you know, like it's hard to not be cliche when you try to summarize a poetry book. So I thought about what do the poems do? Do they hit you in the gut? Do they make you feel like you're on a roller coaster? Do they make you laugh? You know, do they confuse you? Whatever, like those sensations that we get. So I tried, yeah, I thought I wanted the book to give the reader an experience, and I tried to pay attention to that. And so far, I've had a lot of positive feedback, so I feel good about that.
Good. Just a last thing, the reading. A lot of us here read our poems and our prose pretty regularly. Your approach to reading, can you talk about that a little bit? Because I thought it was impressive, but I'm not going to say anything more than that. Other than like, how do you approach it?
I overthink it. No, I mean, like, I was still deciding what was to put in and swap out one, upstairs before I came down here, so. I try to think about the audience, I try to think about like I just said, the experience I'm trying to give. And like I wouldn't do two poems that ultimately add up to the same kind of experience, or I tried not to, try to have, yeah, so try to have variety in there. I learned, I didn't know really until people started reading the book that what I call the spine of it, the Love is Finished Again poem that kind of creates these breaks. That was probably the smartest thing I did when I put the book together, I think, because a lot of people tell me it's their favorite part of the book. They know that they can look forward to the next one. And so it becomes this familiar thing. So even if they're confused or bored or
Yeah,
they don't follow the complex thought, they know there's another one of those coming. Um, so I just do a mini version of that into a reading as well.
Your delivery too is, and delivery always interests me, right? And your delivery is, how do you conceptualize what do you think about your own delivery? Yes.
So that's another thing about the book is that I tried to strip out the punctuation as much as I could from the book, and I I'm not sure I'm not sure I could say why I did that today, but it puts the reader in this position where you have to make sentences, and your brain will do that if you got a string of words. Your brain will find the subject predicate, like will find a unit of meaning. But I think I took out the punctuation because as a poet, you want more possibilities of meaning, right? So if there's a double meaning hidden in there, or there's a meaning you can get from a line break instead of a comma and a period, you do that. So, but then you still have to kind of know what the sentence is to be able to read it. So I have worked really hard on how I hear the poem, what I want the primary sentence to be. If you read it on the page, you may have a different experience, or you may find a different place to stop and rest. But I have my kind of interpretation of it. So yes, I have every poem I read, I have just a lot and thought a lot about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions, ideas?
It's, there was an image that you were reading about your great grandmother Camilla, and it just the thought of her feet of wanting to be. I don't know. I'm assuming you're Italian American.
Yeah.
How much of that experience and how much of that upbringing informs your writing, or informs your creative process? I guess.
I think it's all in there. I mean, so, and for example, that's the kind of thing that I had a close relationship with my nana, my mother's mother, who lived. She died when I was 37 years old. I got to know her pretty far into my life, and she would tell stories, and that's the kind of image that word stayed with me, and I know it's got some power to it. Like I'm going to find a place to put this in a poem someday, and it's a particular pleasure when you're able to do that. Someone else might read that poem and be like, that doesn't belong there, or that's weird that comes in. But I think I sometimes think it's my job as a poet to bring unlike things together and see what they do.
Well, thank you. This is a great talk. I really, really enjoyed this. So thanks, Anthony.
Thank you very much.
Take a couple of minute break before we get to our open. Help yourselves to coffee, the bathroom, whatever you need. All right. Yeah.
Well, Justin is. So technically, I don't have every month. Every month. I think part of it. Oh, yeah. I think that is the hardest. That's the last thing I'll chat. Sure. This is gonna be so boring. It was 7 with the sauce. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Somewhere in finals, you are. You know, then we get involved and be like, awesome. So then I found, going they travel.
How you doing? That, you want anything? I know.
Sure. All right. I don't know what he's doing on the mic. We asked a lot of operations here, and he's only takes every month. He wants to know that yeah, and actually, people just circle. Yeah. What? Fine.
No.
On the ground experience, people are willing to do all really, that's the mindset give up. My wife, and he does nice. And why I think it's you were. Where was it? Yeah, there is.
Excuse me. How are you? How are you? You remember me? You do. Yes, they do. Yeah. Sitting on your son's stuff. Oh. Just looking at some. With that, yeah. I think it was over my head, but, yeah. Can you guys still around after I left on, at Mark? Wow. There used to see that stuff. Yeah. Right. I'll show you photos of it, but the one I'm working on. Was the first one I did. So I you have a place in Florida? No, actually, sure. I had both there. And I have a very good. Thank you.
So when you go back.
Why that's all. So I was there the other day, so. All the guests of. So. I got it.
I tried to tell her when you go like this, you gotta.
Oh, it's
Kevin.
Okay, it's my son.
You're going to Front Porch or you went to?
No.
Oh, sure.
My friend.
Thank you.
All right. You see how. And you need some good luck.
And then I got.
I got a little, it's like a little thing you make, I'm making more of them.
Okay.
So what do you think about time?
You guys did.
No, it's.
All right. Thank you so much.
Is mine the way?
Dad, Bill saying goodbye, Bill, what you were saying. If I don't see it, you sit your back.
It's nice to meet you. You like this song?
Yeah. Give his best to Sonia.
See you later.
All right.
That's a simple.
Everybody, I'm gonna get us started, so we can go enjoy our evening, what's left of it. Not that we're not enjoying it now, maybe a little outdoor time. Next month, I think, don't hold me to this, but our poet, our book to poet, had to cancel, Corey Zeller, who's a terrific poet, so it's a loss. However, I think it may be an opportunity for an open mic night, which might be fun. Everybody gets a little longer and wheel out the stuff we're working on. Yeah, so that's gonna be September 20th, Friday, September 20th, and then Saturday, October 12th, the rare Saturday reading is going to be Jennifer Sears, erstwhile Mennonite, now longtime New York City resident and writer and novelist and short story writer. Really interesting person will be here reading about life as a Mennonite. And then in November, Jennifer Brown from Maryland, who has a new book out, is coming. I'm forgetting the name, but she's terrific, and she'll be here November 15th. So those are the fall dates. Mark your calendars. Okay, I'm going to kick off the open mic. I have one poem, something that I did. I think it's a free write, Anthony. I think it happened today, and I haven't been writing a lot of poems, so. I do have a book called Zen of Pop, which is all about trying to find the truth of different icons of pop culture, songs, other elements of pop culture. And this came to me today. I was listening to a song called The Hook, which is an old Blues Travelers song. And thinking, The Hook Part 2. We were told the band lived next door, and she liked rumors, and had a way of making jokes about French lit, and imitating her mother, and smiling sincerely, that told me we'd be the opposite of I love you too, or was it I love you too? But we love the harmonica parts and drum fills, the things that make love pop, 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 exciting. The band leader, in fact, was named Papa. And heavy and a little grimy. And I don't think we turned each other on. Maybe it was my belly or the curve of her spine or how I disliked myself and my own thoughts of how she was wasting my time and youth, and yet I needed her there. Or a certain chord that rang like a bell of a cathedral in a city you always wanted to visit, but never could. But still I said, you mean everything to me, when we didn't mean any of it. And the light from the window fell on the cheap couch where we sat for hours and days until the song and the band moved away and we had nothing to do but admit we couldn't write our own. So that'll kick it off. You can all do better than that, so I'm going to call you up here. And our first performer. That's a lot of pressure when you say some guys are going to come, except for Beth. Then it's never any pressure. But John is going to read something for us, perform something. It's John Vaughn.
So unfortunately, this is really difficult. I am in the process of writing a novel. And I think I talked about it before at a reading, where it's an exchange of letters between two loved ones, one that's a soldier in World War II and other is back home. And it's really cool because the story has evolved a bunch of times. And I was going to have the young woman stay home, be a home, here in Dansville, but I did some research and I discovered something called donut dollies with the Red Cross. And they were women who went overseas and they literally had, it was like a bus, like a camper, where they would go to different units and they would make donuts and they would make the soldiers feel welcome. They talk about back home and they serve them. So in my story, I have it evolving where the young woman lies about her. You had to be 25, you had to have an education, and the young woman lies about her age and becomes a donut dolly. So I have one of the, an excerpt from it. So, September 20th, 1942, my dearest, I have not heard from you in several weeks, and I'm worried about you. Has something happened to you? Have you fought the Germans yet? The scuttlebutt is that, oops, excuse me. The scuttlebutt is that something big is about to happen, but the stories go from outlandish to downright crazy, including my personal favorite, that you all have parachuted into Berlin and the war is about to end. I know that the day is coming when you'll be fighting the Nazis, but it still terrifies me. The notion of you not returning home to me does haunt me pretty much every day. I take comfort, though, in the thought of you serving your country and bravely making yourself proud. Speaking of serving your country, oop, sorry, my cursor is crazy today. Speaking of serving your country, do you remember my last letter, where I signed up to join the Red Cross to be part of the Club Mobile Service? Yesterday, I completed my training, and now I'm affectionately called a Donut Dog. I will be part of a group of women heading to England to help take care of the troops. We will be giving away cigarettes, gum, candy bars, comic books, and a whole bunch of other stuff. We're also going to be serving coffee and donuts to all the troops. There is one thing that I must confess to you as I'm about to embark on my own adventure. I lied on my application to the program. You're supposed to be 25 years old or older and have a college degree. I have neither. Does that make me a bad person? Sorry, guys. My computer doesn't like me today. Does that make me a bad thing? Does that make me a bad person? You hate me for lying. You used to tell me that one of the things that you loved the most about me was my honesty. I remember you used to tell me that you loved that you had never had to guess how I was feeling because I didn't hesitate to tell you. Well, yesterday I boarded a train at the Rochester station and was heading for Washington, D.C. This is where they sent all of us for the selection and training process. It was my father that took me to the train station. And when we pulled into the parking lot to drop me off, he looked at me with a sad yet proud look on his face. He wouldn't make eye contact with me for longer than a few moments at a time. I could tell that he wanted to tell me something, but something else was keeping him from speaking what was on his mind. He was never a man filled with emotions, so this was strange and foreign experience for me. And I will let you guys wait till the book comes out.
All right. I'm gonna stay here and get Walt Franklin up here. Walt.
I'll sit, but I'll share a few short poems.
All right.
Despite all the joys of old age, once in a while, and I like looking back to the youth days of youth and trying to keep things in perspective. So these little pieces are from high school, from college life, from that era of my time, and let's see.
The kids are going back to college now, Walt. So this is well timed. Yeah.
Yeah, all rolling here. This was called a sketch left by a girl who shared my room. Today I know she's less to me and I am less to her than this sketch from our single night together in the mesh of being that ejects us each to our own world. And yet two shadows dance skin to skin in fullness of a penciled lamppost, bedpost, and sneaker overturned. Another even shorter piece. This one is for the girls singing Neil Young on Wisconsin Avenue, DC. I heard you singing as I walked out onto the street. Years later, you are still that girl, all that I remember from one rushing day, and swaying, still swaying like a tree by a distant river. Two more. All that I remember. 67, 1967. After Paul and I left our hospital jobs and picked up two girls on a downtown street to drive upriver into sand and trees. After I began to reel, impaired by a sixth of beer, a first kiss and a moan beside the starlit waves and hint of seas. After driving home in dying darkness and grasping nine days for the strength to call her and link her magic to my need again. And after hearing how her mother said, "I'm sorry," is the great relief that something so unworldly and encompassing could at last be almost unchained from the heart. And a similar piece, I guess this is summer, age 19. I took a night off from the factory, met her at a party in the city of lakes. She lived among winding drives, lush trees and homes with hired maids. Her heart mapped a route clear into nursehood. My heart sailed uncharted seas, but I remember movie seats, the waves of her being rushing through. I remember how the city boiled around us, how the moon lost dusky purity in a day, how distant jungles splashed with fire.
All right. And Beth, your name is not on the list. Oh my God, it is way on the bottom right. Well, you're gonna go last then because you put your name way on the bottom. That's right. All right. Celia, Celia, can I put in a plug for what you guys are doing up at Linwood?
Sure.
They're starting, have started a series in a beautiful setting. You want to describe that beautiful setting and tell us what you're doing? And
Yeah, I'll see a little. So we had a couple of poetry readings, gatherings open mic at Linwood Gardens, which is up in Linwood. Not far from Geneseo. And Linwood Gardens is an old family place. I think I'm fourth generation now. So I have only just moved there to live with Michael. And in the spring, it's open mostly to the public in the spring when we have a tree cleaning festival, because we propagate tree cleanings and we have hundreds and hundreds of them. And for about 3 weeks in the spring, they are all in bloom. It looks over the valley. It's really quite a spot, and so also inspiring for poets and artists, and so sometimes have workshops. And in earlier generations, many poets, artists, writers came to visit. So I hope to see you all here. And I have just some very recent sketches to read. They're pretty short. And they're local. I'm kind of still getting to know the neighborhood here. So the first one is it's the urgent care parking. And can you hear me, everybody? Okay. Machines, sounds everywhere. Dump trucks grinding, beeping back and forth, backhoes swinging loads, car doors slamming, a riding lawnmower in a tavern's yard, the man with monster headphones. People heading to the clinic, mouths moving, but all I hear is engines. A patient comes in handcuffs. Skinny guy with lots of hair in bright orange garb. Tubby guard attending. Another in a gray jumpsuit, also skinny. 2 huge guards attending, male in front, female behind, an old man, an odd couple, mom and baby, everyone walking gingerly, except the prisoners and guards. When the prisoners emerge again, the lady at the desk shouts, "Have a nice day." That's the first. Second one comes from Linwood Gardens barnyard. The barn smells of old leather, worn saddles, soft bridles. Now brittle leather harnesses hang cracked, stiff on the wall in the room with a giant mirror for checking dressage attire. Further in, resident birds, coons, bats, and all their remains overwhelm the smell of old leather, soaked through in salty horse sweat. Gramps is here, just his face and warm hands. And one more quick one from just sitting at home. Out the second floor window, framed dark oak leaves, masses of them, shining. Last night's raindrops in sunlight. With my glasses off, they're stars. They've rained down to hang on branches in clear sun.
All right. Thank you. And now, you cannot be followed. Beth Illy Swoboda. Here she comes.
My father.
No, never follow her. Especially when she has the guitar. It's not the mountain dulcimer, but it is the guitar. Where is the mountain dulcimer tonight? Is it taking a break or?
Okay, we all know that basically I'm a rhymer. And so we're talking about forms, it's the rhyme thing that gets me. The other thing is I write about myself a lot, but I'm gonna spare you all that tonight. And, well, there is a little bit of rhyming in this one, but I post every day on Facebook. So, oh, I just lost it. Okay. Oh. We scroll down. This is what is today. It's August. I have to go back way. Oh, here's one. This is called Spider Tail. There was an old, because I'm doing things about not me, remember? There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. You know that song? I know she was here, and I'll tell you why. The spider appeared on my blank wall tonight. He was searching for grub. Yes, that was his plight. He wanted a fly, but the flies were all gone, consumed by that famous old woman of song. Yes, that's what she did. She ate all the flies that used to buzz here. I tell you no lies. You may think this yarn I'm spinning's absurd, but that web weaver fled, scared off by a bird. And I made a bird up. The bird was there. There's a little picture of it. So I'm going to scroll down a little more. No more. Oh, yes, 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 yes. Yes, yes. Partners in crime. Okay. Two old ladies going to Hades in a Mercedes Benz, wearing bikinis, wolfing down Bellinis, happy that they are friends. Obviously, these ladies are widows whose husband left them in good financial standing. Just how did those guys meet their demise? I know. but I will never tell. It was a crime. The gals won't do time, but surely they'll end up in hell. So that's where the name goes. Now I'm going to go back to last month on the 23rd, August here. Oh dear. I tried to save you all time, but get it all set up in advance, but no.
That never works.
Oh, well, here, I'll start on this one. I do write about myself sometimes. It's like, all right, there's a picture here. See that picture? See the picture?
Sort of.
No, it looks a little bit X-rated, but it's really just,
So low for Fred, no.
it's just my arm. Where once the skin was smooth and tight, it now is such a hideous sight, but that's what happens when we age. The packaging induces rage. Anger is not good for us. It's better to accept than cuss. And so to let go, I will strive. I'll just think along. Now we're still going back. To the 23rd of the prior month. Oh, it's beyond, oh, I just write every day. Oh, it's ridiculous. I'm looking for a story about Heather. Heather, where are you? Oh, July 30th, we're getting closer. Still July 30th. She's still July 30th. Oh, holy crap, I wrote a lot different. July 29th, yes. Oh, here I am. I had to show this. Oh, did he leave? He left. Speaking of Letchworth, that's one of the buildings, the inside buildings at Letchworth. That's me coming there years ago. So you must go and get on the list. Okay, July 28th. Oh, we're almost there. We're almost there. Yes, we are. Oh, come on, Beth. Oh, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. It's after this one. Yes, it is. Yes, service with a smile. This is service with a smile. It's all about Heather Burns. Free spirit, Heather Burns, had a massive crush on her neighbor, Ed. Ed was a professional truck driver. One of the most important jobs for ensuring the health of our economy and our way of life. He was on the road for days at a time. Heather knew his schedule by heart. Ed could count on Heather welcoming him home with open arms. One day, she wrote a poem in anticipation of Eddie's arrival. Heather loved writing rhymes. Her DNA contained a bit of her ancestor Robert's passion for poetry. This is what she wrote. Drivers of trucks deserve loving fucks to thank them for all of their labor, and that's LABUR. She has the Scottish.
Sure, gotcha.
So later tonight, I will delight the trucker who's also my neighbor. That man, I'll romance. I'll frolic and dance with scarves and my shiny new saber. Won't throw him a curve, so happy to serve. I will thank him by tossing his caber. Heather chuckled to herself. Then she put down the phone, cooked a lovely dinner, and waited. That night, totally satisfied. Both Heather and Eddie wore big smiles and nothing else. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Highland games, a caber is big, like a big telephone pole, looks like. And the guys like carry it around like this. They carry it around like this. That's what they do. Okay.
I believe you. Maybe I've seen this. I don't know.
I was observed when I was in Scotland when I was 17, but left playing in college.
Oh, clearly.
Okay, now, so that's about Heather. No, I've got one about, uh, Kerrygold.
That's in butter.
You're going to say something.
Not related to the butter in any way. Maybe, could be, perhaps. Hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go.
Did you know this? You've heard this before. Have you heard this?
No, I don't think so.
You were getting it by this. You've been astute.
I know. I'll be-
Okay. So. Hello. My name is Carrie. In a long time. And I'm not the greatest guitar player. But I'm trying to be fresh. I'm a pretty love. I'm pretty fresh. And just so much. Change. Then nothing left of me. And you can love me down. I'll cook it French toast, baby, and turn it golden brown. But if you use me up, you'll have no company. Why to be spread on a wicked love of working bread. Oh, I want G. I'll play a piano sandwich if you don't strike me too thin. If you want me, baby, you would be a sin. So be good and last longer. Try it now and you will see. But when I warmed up, so take care of it now, respond. With you, you won't need a magic, magic wand. I should practice to the top. To help me go to your red, delicious sleep. Very much.
You leave us